with the latest coming in on COVID-19, as China's mass coronavirus testing in Hong Kong has now alarmed the city's residents. This as some residents fear that China might be using the testing as an excuse to collect DNA samples for surveillance purposes. China has sent a 7-member team of health officials to the city. Over 50 officials are scheduled to arrive in the coming days. This is the first time since the pandemic that China has sent a medical team to Hong Kong. Residents say that the testing is a sign of growing Chinese interference in Hong Kong, especially after the imposition of the national security law. However, the city's officials have defended the testing, saying that COVID cases have been increasing in Hong Kong. The city has reported over 3,400 coronavirus infections and 33 deaths, but the daily number of new cases has been in the triple digits for the past 2 weeks.
怎么反复在香港的情况跟这个在其他世界各地都是在做有一个大爆发的情况底下，我觉得就是多做一点检测，把我们的检测的能力扩大是对这个疫情一定有非常大的帮助。
For the latest on this news story, I'm joined in by our correspondent Richard Kimber, who's joining me live from Hong Kong at this hour. Richard, a very warm welcome to you. Now, let me begin by asking you about what the government in Hong Kong has to say. We'll touch upon the national security law in just a bit. But before that, why has the Hong Kong government reached out to China for widespread testing in the first place? How bad is the so-called third wave of infections?
Well, the government says it has no option but to ask for help from China because it's being overwhelmed by the consistent number of high cases here. We're now on a 12th straight day of 100-plus cases, and actually only today has that been broken. There are 80 new cases today, so for the first time in 13 days we're less than 100. So some signs of a possible recovery if that can be kept up. But the hospital capacity here for COVID patients is said to be around 80%. And so the government says it has no option but to ask for help, and help is coming because, as you say, there are some experts from China who have been involved in building some temporary mass structures in places like Wuhan that are now here in Hong Kong, and the aim is to try and, in the space of the next few weeks, be able to test everybody in Hong Kong. That's 7.5 million people in an effort to try and stamp out this third wave. And because these experts from China have specific experience in mass testing on that scale, that's why the government says they've reached out for help.
All right. Now, Richard, in the wake of the newly introduced national security law, is the Chinese government now using COVID-19 as a pretext to ramp up surveillance in Hong Kong, considering there's already been a massive crackdown on the pro-democracy protesters?
Well, as with so many things in Hong Kong, there's a huge amount of political sensitivity with regards to any China involvement. And so even though this might seem like a health issue as far as the government's PR campaign is concerned, there's still a huge amount of anti-government sentiment here, particularly because of what's happened just 3 days ago when the Hong Kong government announced that it's delaying the legislative election that's due for September the 6th. And that's seen to be pressure from Beijing on the Hong Kong government, preventing the Hong Kong government from allowing that election to take place because of expectations that the pro-democracy camp will score significant gains in that election. So now anything that the government is announcing is being met with a huge amount of distrust, and that's why there are concerns from some people that even this aid from China with regards to the virus could be a disguise for some other more devious mechanism by which they can collect DNA samples. Now, the government here has dismissed that entirely and said that's completely unfounded and it's just rumour mongering from anti-government activists. But even with these types of health issues, there's still this huge amount of anti-government sentiment here that's making it very difficult for the communication stream between the government and the public.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned the distrust in the masses, and perhaps that distrust is very much understandable. We'll leave it at that for now. Thank you so much, Richard Kimber, for joining us live on this broadcast.